Africa has endured centuries of external control from slavery and, of course, to still a whole lot of things happening, I can tell you, even to colonialism, to modern economic dependencies. Yet today, a new conversation is emerging, and that is how Africa can define development, governance, and prosperity on her own terms. I am Grace Komolafe, and this is Across Borders. Today, we want to examine egalitarianism and whether equality can truly drive Africa's political and economic future. Our guest is Bishop Dr. Abraham Williams, an author, journalist, and a Pan-African thinker, born in Sierra Leone with Liberian heritage. He is the author of African Egalitarianism, The Pathway to the Glorious African Renaissance, where he proposes an alternative political and economic vision for Africa grounded in equality and sovereignty. And I am talking about Bishop Dr. Abraham Williams. It's such a pleasure to have you join us this morning, Dr. Williams. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. I'm glad to be with you, connected from Monrovia, Liberia.
Oh, great. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you. It's a pleasure. So we just get started because we've actually lost some time already. So let's go into the program proper. I want to ask you, for the sake of the layman, in clear terms, could you tell us what egalitarianism is and how does it apply to Africa's political and economic future?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, egalitarianism, as I described it, is actually a novel social, economic, and political ideology that I coin in my book. The aspect of egalitarianism, equal opportunity, so that the outcomes will be equal, because we are all not equal in the terms of our IQ, in terms of our expertise, our talents and abilities, and so on and so forth. But the aspect of egalitarianism is talking about giving each person in Africa equal opportunity, for example, to go to school, to harness the best education. And then after that, the person will be able to excel in his or her area to the zenith, so that no one is left behind because of lack of resources financially or because of lack of opportunities, for them to be able to explore their God-given and other abilities that they will have to acquire along the way. So egalitarianism is talking about that aspect in terms of our economic and as far as our personal development is concerned.
Okay, okay.
Well,
thank
but
you.
look at
So I want to ask you, how does egalitarianism connect to African democracy, and why do you believe democracy in Africa needs to be retaught? Why did you think so?
Yeah. The thing is that democracy in Africa is based on Western democracy. Western democracy is a very good system that applies to the West, and it very well thrives there. It gives people opportunities. I wouldn't say equal opportunities, but it gives them opportunities. And almost everybody can harness that opportunity in diverse manners and magnitude. But you will realize that the West, basically Europe, America, or the Americas, is actually basically a monocultural and monolinguistic setting. That means most of them have one language. Most of them have one kind of cultural setting, if you like, except for those who are either primitive or those who are the natives. Maybe like in America now, you will find the Red Indians who are the natives. But on a general note, you find out that they are monocultural and monolinguistic. And so Western democracy can work very well there, and it has worked and thrived there because it doesn't divide them. They are divided basically on ideological levels and parties. But here in Africa, you find out that we are multicultural and multilinguistic in our background. As a result, when you just transplant, I will use that word, transplant Western democracy into the African setting, you find out that we are divided along ethnic lines, and sometimes it forms on regional lines. So by the time you come with Western democracy, that is multi-party democracy, People are thinking along regional lines, thinking along ethnic lines. And the politicians here work in those directions. And so instead of Western democracy actually bringing out our unity, it further divides us. And that is what the politicians use here. But you will find that African democracy is trying to say that you will see have multiplicity of political parties, but has to be restricted so that it doesn't further divide us much more. And then Western democracy, when you consider it in the West, it's like they regard themselves as equal. And so they operate as giving all the opportunity in terms of candidature, in terms of a level playing field, for them to operate, to campaign, and all the other things. But in Africa, it is different because Western democracy, to me, is used by the West in order to subjugate us furthermore, in order to exploit us. And as a result, you find out that when it comes to electioneering process and the electioneering outcomes also, you will see that those candidates that the West considered, especially the colonial masters, when you go to maybe some parts in West Africa, for example, now, when you see those who have been colonized by the British people, you will see that they will have the candidate that they will consider as the best candidate, either from the UN background or some other background that they see as their own favorite candidate. And they will be behind the candidate until the candidate succeeds. And even if that candidate in his or her presidency really does not govern very well in democracy, they will still be supporting that person. And they will say, well, whether there were election irregularities, they were not enough to cause any difference in the outcome, you know. And so sometimes they maintain puppets, like in Cameroon, for example, you will see that they've maintained pure beer because it serves the interests of the French people. They've maintained it. In Congo, they maintained the Bogos for a long while. So you will see that Western democracy supports a particular kind of puppet to Western exploitation of Africa. But then
Okay.
in egalitarianism, yes,
Just go ahead.
yes, in egalitarianism, we are saying that we make a level playing field so that when African countries have elected their own presidents, the presidents are there to be able to seek the interests foremost of the country. It is not like a Western, I would call it, hegemony that is there and having a puppet that is in Africa that they are going to use so that they will be negotiating certain concessions, certain deals, certain investment concessions that will actually profit those who are investing from the West mostly, and then giving pittances to the African country. And as much you will see that economically, the Africans are not benefiting so much. They are
Yeah.
benefiting very minimally.
Okay. Okay. So I want to talk about the colonial influence. You have mentioned that the West, you mentioned that everything about them is put together, their culture, the language, everything is one, is unity. So I am thinking that if the West actually colonized Africa, I mean, how does this colonial role actually shift democratic and governance system, that Africa inherited after independence? So if they have colonized Africa and they have everything working for them, how come? Because I want to believe that when a child lives with a parent, he or she learns, from them and begins to do what they do. Do you understand? Why is it that we're having something different in Africa? Multi-language and multicultural and all of that. Why is it so?
Well, the aspect of multilinguistic and cultural backgrounds, that one I would say is something that is brought about by God. Where biblically we would say the Tower of Babel. It's like, if you like, I would say humorously, that the Tower of Babel fell in Africa. As a result, we have more languages and cultural backgrounds. Okay, but I would want to inform you historically that many civilizations started in Africa. The art of learning started in Africa. The art of invention started in Africa. Even philosophy started in Africa. People like Plato, people like Aristotle came to Egypt, ancient Egypt, and learned philosophy before they went back to Greece, and the West in order to popularize it. So you will see that we are not like actually children of the West. The reverse is that the West should have been children of Africa because that is how it is. Now, looking at it from the colonial perspective, we will see that in my book I described that Africa disadvantaged itself from the outset because of our mentality. I call it a patronage mentality and system of governance. That is to say, since the African, runs an empire, the people and the wealth belong to the emperors and their dynasties and their cronies. And as a result, they are the ones that share what belongs to the country, what belongs to them. And most often than not, what belongs to the dynasty is higher, far higher, maybe 80% of the wealth. And of course, those that serve belong like as to them who are leading. And as a result, you see that we are disadvantaged. Instead of us growing in our knowledge, in those kind of God-given advantages that we are actually brought up into, we find out that we reversed as a result of our mentality. And so, when the slave masters came, or the colonial masters came, first looking at slavery, you will see that they were easily able to accede to colonialism because those people who were agitating against the kind of misrule, those who were agitating against their patronage system, who felt that the wealth has to be shared across the board so that everybody benefits maximally. They started looking at them as antagonists, as enemies. They put them in dungeons. People like the Singlepiers in Sierra Leone, my own country, and other places. And so you see that when the slave masters came, it was not the ordinary Africans that they sold. It was these brains who were against them that they sold into slavery. And you will know the Amistad revolt. Just imagine people who were on chains. And then their masters and whoever were manning that ship had guns, although it was single barrel. And they knew that these were single barrels. If you shoot one, they will reload, it will take time. And so they had to overpower those who had guns. So people on chains could do that. You will know that these were brave. So you see that that's how Africa now destroyed the fabric of their own brains. Those who were innovators, those who were philosophers, those who could think properly and make the society to be egalitarian, to have equal opportunity, in the wealth, in the resources, and in every other way.
Okay. So let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your book. You've mentioned it briefly, but I want to ask you again. You wrote the book African Egalitarianism, the pathway to the glorious African Renaissance, 2022 and beyond. What inspired you to author this book?
Yes, yes. I was inspired, I will believe, by God because I'm a man of God. And also, I am an international rights advocate and I'm passionate about African development. I'm a Pan Africanist to the core. And so, I read in between the lines. I studied in Nigeria, for example, for quite a while. I worked there in northern Nigeria, in the Middle Belt, in Enugu, that's in eastern Nigeria. And I traversed Nigeria for a while. So I observed in Nigeria and I've observed in Guinea and in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in places where I've been in Africa, that we are mostly under exploitation in the name, even colonialism. Colonialism to me was just slavery legitimized so that they could now, in broad daylight, come exploit our resources, no adding additional value to it, not giving us much skills, and going out and using it, adding value there. and giving themselves skills, coming back with the same products and exploiting us, selling to us very costly things that they could have processed in Africa and then added value to it, added skills to young men and young women, and then improve the entrepreneurial landscape and the investment landscape and those kinds of things. So I saw that Africa is under exploitation, serious exploitation from the West. They will normally say we are corrupt. Yes, individually, and our politicians and civil servants, I would say, mostly are corrupt. But I will say that their own of corruption is legitimized industrial corruption. In fact, I would say from Pierre Lumumba say they are stealing on an industrial scale. And I would say they steal massively because they come, they loot our resources, they give us pittance, like for example, 4% after they have invested, and then you combine all the investments, all the administrative and other costs put together, maybe it will be going up to 30%. Then they now give you 4% royalty. And then they go and add value to that one in another country or in the West and bring it back to you and sell it at astronomical cost. So you will find out that Africa is under exploitation. I feel that Western democracy is not helping us. We have to nationalize, if I will say that one. We nationalize our investment so that we can add value to our extractive minerals, for example, gold or
Okay.
diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
We can have
Mm-hmm.
subsidiary industries. Yeah.
Okay, so you've talked about exploitation, and I can see that you're very passionate about this, you know. And so for me, I am actually looking at both ways. So when we talk about the West being, exploiting Africans, I want us to also look at Africans. Is it possible that we chart the right course to ensure that we block all the loopholes, to guide it to ensure that this stops? I mean, it could not be, probably might not be a one-off thing, like a one-day thing, a miracle that will happen today. But what are the processes that should be put in place to ensure that we put a stop to all of this? And again, looking inward, you see that Africans ourselves, in one way or the other, we kept exploiting ourselves because you've mentioned corruption and all of that. What do we need to do to begin to see ourselves as equals, to begin to see the need not to exploit one another? So even if at home we are able to guide all of this and we are sensitized, I want to believe that it will be easy to even fight the fight from the outside. What do you think?
You are very correct. You are very, very correct. I can't put it any better. In fact, in my book, I devote a chapter to that. I call it the paradox, sociological paradox. It's a sociological paradox that we Africans, we say we are communal. When you say you are communal, it means that you believe in like the Ubuntu philosophy, whereby you will say that I exist because we exist. I succeed because we succeed. That means that I care more for my community and my people as against my own personal benefit. And so it means that as I am succeeding, I want my community, my country to succeed. That is what communalism to me would actually mean. But you see that in the paradox, we that say we are communal, we are the ones stealing from our brothers. I think that the West never have wanted Africa to be one because they see that Africa has vast resources and Africa has brains, really. But because we disadvantage ourselves with our mentality and system of governance, that patronage mentality, whereby the one who is head is the one that profits maximally. So they came in now, and once they have uh, managed to shove us behind, they make sure they keep us behind. So they bring in structures. They bring in what you call best practices, whether it's economic best practices, accountability best practices. All those ones, mostly, they are just written on paper and structures, but the system is not working. And they know that it's not working, and they're happy that it's not working because it serves them. For example, the issue of corruption is an endemic perennial, in fact, I call it a Herculean monster. It's a Herculean monster that is killing Africa. Now, if you come up with corruption cases now, and you have a court system that is already inundated with several other cases, criminal, civil, and other cases. If you really want to fight corruption, you, the president, or those that are spearheading, should be able to lead by example. That's one. But secondly, I feel that they should have a fast track court, an exclusive fast track court to fight corruption, in which case, within a month or free, they should be able to move in and gather evidences and be able to prosecute. They should be robust about fighting this corruption because that's the greatest monster that we have, whether in the presidency, whether in governance, in the civil service, and that is what is making the people from the West and all the people that are coming in, whether from the East, anywhere they're coming from, to come and exploit us because they be able to link up with our corrupt leaders, civil servants, and they make some kind of concessions that they know are not going to maximize profit for us, but for them. And a few of the corrupt people that are in governance, in the civil service. And so, in order to be able to really handle those areas, we want to make sure that the civil service is, I wouldn't say corrupt free, because man generally is corrupt, but that the civil service, those that enter into civil service, are not entering there in order to make money for themselves or enrich themselves, but they should be serving the country so that the country and the people of the country are placed as priority. That's one thing.
Okay.
Also, those who are in governance should be able to see the people and the country as foremost priority instead of enriching themselves and amassing what I call generational wealth. That's the thing they need to do. So we
Okay.
have to be able to control corruption as one major enemy.
Okay. So basically, you are talking about leadership by example, which is very key. You know, they say you lead when you lead, others follow. It is what you do, others see you do that. A lot of people will want to emulate and hear his power. So I'm asking that how do you think an egalitarian system would change leadership, decision making, and accountability in African countries?
Yes, for example, let me give a biblical inference um, quickly before I move on. In Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 14 and 15, when Nehemiah returned and was able to spearhead the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, he was made governor, let's say president of Israel at that point in time. He said those that had gone before him, even during the time of the enslavement of the Jews, when they were in captivity, they used most of the resources, those who are leaders used most of the resources on themselves. But for him, he will not go that route because he see that the people are impoverished. And so he only used 10% of what was actually accrued to royalty. And he said from that 10%, all his ministers, all those who are working along in government, and those who are envoys who come from out, who would need a kind of luxurious entertainment, will feed from that 10%. And so he led by example. That is one thing we need to do. We need to lead by example, as I stated earlier on. But then we have to also nationalize our investment. Now, the world is a global village, we normally say. So you wouldn't say that, oh, we can remain on our own aside from the West. No, we have to interact with all the civilizations, with all, different geographical areas of the world. But we should make sure that we own our investment, our industrial, and our whatever we're doing in the country. We own it, we nationalize it. So anybody that is coming from out, anybody that wants to do investment, anybody that wants to do industrial expansion is welcome, but we must be able to negotiate on a parity kind of negotiation table. It shouldn't be that you come in from out and you tell us this is what will happen, that is what will happen because I'm the one coming to do this and that. We negotiate from a level playing field, not somebody coming to impose on you, so that we can add value. We want to maintain that our extractive raw materials or uh, minerals will not be taken out of the country, but rather value should be added to them, whereby subsidiary industries could, be created, and that will lead to employment explosion, and the economy will boom as a result of that. So we have to create a pathway for ourselves so that as others are coming, we're moving along them, we're moving with the innovation, we're moving with the free market economy. And that's another area. In Africa, when we say free market economy, it is not free because a free market economy will mean that you are making investment to be open to anybody that has capacity in certain areas and is able to sustain that kind of investment. So even if there are 20, 50, 100 kinds of people like that, they could go into it. But here now, you see that most of the time, we just give, whether it's IPDs or we give certain concessions to maybe limited amount of people. And so what will happen is they control the market. They even control the prices because it's only like two people who are importing rice, for example. It's only like four people who are importing building materials, for example, whereas there could be even 20 people importing. It is said the more the merrier. When you have those kinds of opportunities that you actually call a free market economy, you allow people to use their capacity to the maximum so that the consumers are the ones who benefit because the more you have people competing to produce, you have people competing in market, you find out that one, they will improve quality. Number two, they will make sure that they bring prices down. So the consumers are the ones that benefit instead of where you have a manipulated or monopolized market economy. We are only few people that are approved by the government who also are servants of the government or those who are in power who kind of use their influence to be able to get some more money from here and there and there. And then these people who are given those kinds of concessions or privileges to invest are the ones who are working along with them in order to enrich themselves and then impoverish the people. So you find out that the low class, the lower class, they never really come up. They struggle, they strive, but they really never able to come up to the middle class and not not to say to excel to the higher level. So egalitarianism, you want to make sure that you make investment climate very conducive. People are allowed to come in and invest and compete so that they can bring quality to the market. And those qualities can also be controlled in a way that they become cheaper. People can access it cheaper, affordable, marketing will be what the people will be able to enjoy from.
Okay, thank you very much. So I like the fact that you talked about monopolizing the market, where some certain individuals have control over, the market and some certain items. And also talking about decentralizing and ensuring that this thing goes around, people have access to come and invest and all of that. You actually took my next question. So people are poor. The country is rich, the country, African continent is resource rich, but of course, you see that we still have people that remains poor. So, but you've just addressed that, ensuring that it goes around. So we want to move to the next, and this we'll be looking at youth and the future. So, what role do young Africans play in driving the egalitarian political and economic future that you are proposing?
Yes, I think one, the future of Africa and the world lies in the youth because they are our next generation, if you like. One, their mentality needs to change because the average mentality of the African is that once you get into governance, or even you have an opportunity in the private sector, you have to exploit the other person so that you will become the hero. That hero mentality, we have to move it away. As much as everybody has to strive in order to become the best, become the zenith of whatever they're doing, but it shouldn't be at the expense of others. So, number one, they should know that public service is not for personal gain. It's not for you to enrich yourself, to engender what I call generational wealth that you didn't have. What you're supposed to get in 20, 30 years, you want to get it in 2 to 5 years at the expense of the masses. So you deprive them of opportunity. So the youth should be able to reorientate their minds to know that for Africa to forge ahead, so that we can have a level playing, we can have a secure environment. Because poverty is insecurity. When you are the only one, or few of you are the ones that have a lot of money, you will find out that you're always barricading yourself in what I call dungeons. You're barricading yourself in cells. When you go to the West, you see that it's more industrial areas and schools or so other areas that are in fences. But here, once somebody gets good money, he puts himself or herself in a fence because he's afraid that the other people who do not have can get to him, armed robbers will come. You see that poverty is definitely a pointer to insecurity. And so we will have to deal with those kinds of things. People have to orientate their minds to see that I am in governance, I am in the public service to serve the people and the interests of the nation foremost. And then as the nation develops and grows, you are growing along. You will be able to have more salaries, more opportunities, allowances that you will actually enjoy in freedom of mind and conscience because you're not depriving anybody. Instead of going to steal at an industrial scale and then just trying to amass wealth for yourself at the expense of others, you will find out that even when you are doing it, apart from your conscience, you are trying to overprotect yourself because you know that you are guilty. And it is said that the guilty are afraid. So that's an area that we need to make sure we work at. Then also, Africa will need to pay our intellectuals, our skilled personnel. We need to build our skills. As we build our skills in diverse ways, we have to make sure we pay our people. People deserve good pay for good jobs. But I see that in Africa we exploit a lot. It is a patronage system. It's only those who are the top echelons of power, top echelons of the civil service, public service, they are the ones that gain maximally $10,000, $15,000, some of them $40,000 that they get. But you find out that those are just like 2% of the population. But the rest of the other population are just working for them, working for them. Like the police on the street is corrupt. We know they are corrupt. But how can you be paying a police man that works from morning to, let's say, from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock? He's on the street and you give him 200 US dollars per month. How is he going to feed? So he ends up exploiting the people on the road. He ends up exploiting the commuters on the road. He ends up exploiting mostly the drivers and the riders. That's what he does because he has to survive. We need to deal with those kinds of things. Be able to bridge the salary gap. We'll be able to bridge that gap so that people that are working deserve good salaries. They deserve living wages so that it's not only their basic needs, they also need to be able to store. They need to save for their future, for their children's education and several other things that they will need to do, you know. So
Okay.
those are issues that we need to handle. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Thank you. I like the fact that you've been able to mention key areas that needs to be taken care of so that things can continue to work. But of course, yes, it's okay to have conversations like this. It's okay to bear our minds and to ensure that the decision makers get to receive this information and see how they can integrate them, especially when they're putting policies together. But I want to ask, with global power interest and internal challenges, I really want to ask you, how realistic is egalitarianism for Africa today? How realistic?
Well, I would say there is no system that you would say it is completely realistic because capitalism is not realistic. Capitalism is a monster of exploitation. So it's not realistic, but it's going on. So when we look at the fact that 20%, you know, of the world's population is the one controlling the economy of the world, whereby 80% of us are just working for them. When it comes to the pandemics, we work for them. When it comes to investment, we work for them. When it comes to other things, we work for them. Anytime there is an alternative system, they are inhibited and they want to work against it. So you find out that all of these systems are not realistic. Egalitarianism is a realistic system because that is what is normal. All of us are equal. If we say everyone is equal, that means that we are born equal. If we are born equal, then we should be given equal opportunities to express our talents, abilities, and whatever we're able to acquire in life and be able to receive the kind of dividends that we need according to our own inputs into society. And so I would say that African egalitarianism is realistic. We only need to see how we can channel it to work it out. For example, in Africa, we can have intra-African trade as another priority. There are the Dangotes. There are others who are highly skilled. They are in the West. There are others who are thinkers, like myself. And some are in the West, some are here in Africa. We need to be able to have a conference, not necessarily of in person, but we can have virtual conferences. We can have discourses so that we can begin to channel these things together. We can trade. When we trade within our borders, and we want to make sure that we remove a lot of the exploitations on our borders, okay, by paying those who are the borders, the immigration officers, the other officers that are working there, and that kind of a thing, so that the free trade system can really work. It will not be that they are exploiting those business people that are coming, that are just upcoming business people. Because when you fly, you see that it's easier for you. So it means that the current system is supporting what? The gap between the rich and the poor. So those who are poor and trying to come up, they are suppressed over and over again. But those who are higher, they are given more opportunities and privileges and leverage. And so we should be able to see how we can harness our resources. Those conglomerates that are in Africa can come together and invest in the energy sector because it's very important driver to economic and growth in any country. So they can come and work together in that. We can also partner with the West. We can partner with the East. We can partner with anybody as long as we are the ones who are driving the negotiations. We are the ones who are driving whatever concessions in the direction that it will maximally profit the country and the people, and not selling out our rights. For example, some years ago, I read, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I read a research information about this coast, the Mano River coast, the Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast, and Guinea. The amount of marine resources that are in our seas that are being siphoned on the high sea. Most of the transactions take place on the high sea. Those Korean boats and others come in, and it's on the high sea that they do these transactions, and the country does not benefit from that. They only render pittances to the country. For example, they go with 80 billion and they just leave you with 2 billion, and then give another maybe 1 billion to the rest of those who are the corrupt, hierarchy in the country. So the country is just being exploited. by them. Whereas if we are taking charge of our seas, we are taking charge of our capacities that we have, the resources we have, whether it's marine resources, whether it's land resources, whether it's mineral resources, even the human resources that we have, we're able to develop it and bring them to the maximum so that we are able to take charge of our domain.
Okay.
That is going to help us to see how we can forge ahead
All right.
in the right direction.
Yes. So I like the fact that you talked about the internal trade, having African countries coming together, to do things within themselves. I want to ask about those governing bodies, those African governing bodies. How well would you say they are positioned to ensure that this is very effective? Are there policies that remains more like a barrier or challenge that you think they need to look into to ensure that Africa are working together and they ensure they do business within themselves rather than relying on the West?
Oh, yes. Like, for example, we have the Economic Community of West African States. Now we have the passports. I said, what is the difference? When we had the national passports, you come, it's the same thing. You come, you have to go 7 days, you have to go 30 days, you have to go 90 days. It's the same thing like before. So really, they just make principles, they go for charters, but it does not really translate at the grassroots level. Maybe it translates, up there, but it doesn't translate to diplomats. Those ones can enjoy those immunities and facilities and privileges. But once it comes to the grassroots, that's where the exploitation, that's where the abuse and all other things take place. And so we have to make sure that we handle those areas. The trade um, discussions that are going on, we should make sure that they implement them properly without disparity. They should implement them properly because I travel by air, I travel by road, and I observe a lot of things. I feel for the business people. They're exploited. Even you who is not a business person, I have to stand because I'm an advocate. When I go there, they say you have to pay this money. I don't pay anything. In fact, when you ask me to pay, I get so furious in my heart that I cannot give you 1 cent. I can give you money because I know that you are underpaid. But when you ask me as if it is a legitimate thing, I call it you want to legitimize illegitimacy. I will not subscribe to that. But you will see that the ordinary people now, the business people, they are exploited. And it's like they have nothing to do. They just have to succumb because they will waste their time. I would say, keep my baggage down. I can wait for another 1 day. But they don't want because they are doing business. All of these barricades that they are setting and just going to have charters. The ECOWAS charter, they're having the AU. The AU is like a white elephant that does not even exist. ECOWAS is even better than that. They do a little bit better, especially when it comes to interventions and so forth. But AU is like just a charter box. They need to be able to revitalize and be able to recalibrate if they have to be taken seriously. Otherwise, they become redundant, and there may be alternatives that will actually replace them. So I think AU has to champion African egalitarianism and Pan-Africanism because that is why the Organization of African Unity (OAU) was actually established in Addis Ababa. That was the spirit behind it. But you will see that the Westerners never wanted that one because they killed all the champions, the Haile Selassie, the Kwame Nkrumah, the Patrice Lumumba. You can name them on and on and on. They made sure they exterminated them, the Gaddafis, the Thomas Sankaras, all the people. And even now, those ones who are there, like the Paul Kagames, the Ibrahim Traore, the Mahama. Those ones, they are considering them to be dictators. Anybody that comes to nationalize and wants their people and their country to move forward and see how their potentials can be maximized and they can benefit, they call them dictators. It is those ones who are puppets, those ones who support that they will always pamper because they know how much they're getting. See how the French economy is going down. Just imagine that France was getting uranium from Niger Republic and building their nuclear plants and also powering their country, while Niger was one of the poorest countries, if not the poorest country in the world, and one of the darkest. Just imagine. What kind of cruelty is that? So we should be able to nationalize our investment, capacity, industries, so that we can maximize the best, add value to whatever resources we have, add value to them. When we add value, we increase the skills of people, we also increase employment. So we do a lot of things. And when we do that, you will see that there will be so much resources. We will not need to depend on the West to go to IMF and with all their irrational conditionalities that they place on their loans, whatever they call them. You will see that we will be able to have enough and to spare. Look at Burkina Faso, for example. In these 3 years, they have shown that look, there is money, there is wealth, there is potential. We just need to harness them, and then we can work with the West. We can work with the South. We can work with the East. We can work with anybody. India. We can work with Russia. We can work with China. Anybody that wants to work with us. Nobody should dictate to African leaders to say, no, don't work with these people. Don't work with these people. No, we should be able to choose those we work with depending on those that bring maximal benefit and profit to our countries and our people.
All right. I'm just going to ask you two more questions before we call it a day. But you know what you just spoke about kind of raised a bit of concern, and I'd like you to speak to that. You spoke about Ibrahim Traore, standing in his foot, and you also talked about Niger and the current challenge. I want to ask you: is this a thing of too much of authority? Is it a thing of or fear? Is it authority from this end? Too much of power from this end, dominance from this end. I'm talking about the West now. And on this other end, is it a thing of fear? Why is it that some countries are still struggling, finding it difficult, to take the bull by its hand and move on with their own country?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, I'm a Democrat, so I don't really support military interventions. I would say typically. But there are certain interventions that are revolutionary and are necessary when democracy cannot work. Because democracy is not just changing government, democracy is actually ruling for the best interest because it's government of the people, by the people, for the people. That means democracy should work for the interests of the people and the nation. But when that is not happening, you will find out that sometimes there will be need for some interventions. As long as they're revolutionary, they are not just for power greed and to come also and amass wealth that you've seen others have amassed that you want to enter into. Now, what do you really think could happen? The West don't need to be afraid. They don't need to feel inhibited by what is happening. They only need to know that when they say sovereignty, it means that the country determines its own pathway, political, economic, and other areas of existence. So they can come alongside and partner with countries, with governments in order to foster the development of those countries. But they shouldn't come dictating. For example, just imagine in Liberia that I live, Firestone, which is a very, very big American company, has been in this country for almost 100 years. They have not produced one rubber commodity. Even Firestone tires are produced elsewhere and brought back to Liberia and sold at astronomical cost. Whereas they could have been producing Firestone tires and other rubber materials right in Liberia, giving skills to young people in the country and establishing industries and expanding instead of just exploiting, taking the raw latex. It's just recently that a moratorium was placed on that. you know, and an executive order said that that should not happen again. But you don't need to have an executive order for that. If you are actually coming with a good intention that you want to see these people develop and come up at par with you or compete with you, then you should be able to come in to see where their weaknesses are with honesty, sincerity, and build them up. But that is not the case. They are always coming in to exploit. That's the problem. So the West should not feel inhibited by countries like let's say the Sahel. They shouldn't feel. They shouldn't feel inhibited by South Africa or even Ghana or Rwanda. They should see how can we come and work as a parity, as sovereign countries, not as big brothers, world powers, superpowers, who want to chart the globe the way they want, according as the political scientists would say, by their whims and their caprices. They should come in with an open heart to say, look, we should leave all this exploitation. You see that is why there is a growing quest now for reparation. This slavery and the colonialism, those 400 to 500 years of exploitation of Africans and dehumanization of Africans, that they need to do reparation, not only apologies, but they should actually give tangible reparations that are negotiated, not them saying we were going to do this for you. No, they are supposed to come up with the government that is in power and be able to negotiate those things. Why is it that there is a growing quest for that? It's because people are waking up to the fact that we have been dehumanized and exploited for far too long. So they should come up now with a clear mind to say we are not coming in so that we can profit too maximally from you. We are coming in as partners so we can help you also develop. Even some of the brain drain that we're experiencing. See the Mediterranean graveyard, I call it. It's a graveyard for Africans and Asians that are not making it in their countries. They are running out to go to the West and dying in their thousands in the Mediterranean because they are not conducive economic atmosphere in their countries. There are some people who are disciplined who wouldn't do that work. But some people have tried and tried, they've labored and labored, but there is no way. So they have to find, sociologically, everybody moves towards where there are opportunities and better conditions for life. So that one, it is not a bad thing for people to move towards what is good sociologically. So I would feel the West, they do not need to be afraid of Africa, but they should come now as um, equal brothers negotiating for the betterment of each country, if you like.
Okay. So as we wrap up, I want you to tell us something very unique about your book, maybe an aspect that you want to give us a take home from your book. That's one. And secondly, the way forward. I want to ask that what practical steps should African leaders and citizens begin to, take now to move towards egalitarian governance? What steps should be taken and something you take away from your book? Let's do that quickly as we wrap up.
Yeah. Well, what I would like to say first on my book is that in my book, which I will have to send maybe to you later on, um, I have proposed a lot of things. One is that we should have an adaptable and adaptive democracy, not Western democracy. Western democracy has not helped Africa. So we need to be able to chart our own democracy. For example, maybe even the term limits. I mean, except it is maybe an old government. But 5 years, when you take power, the first 1, 2 years, you are only trying to familiarize yourself with power, governance, and solidify. That means if it's 5 years, you only have 3 years. What can you really do? So that time limit for Africa may need to be extended, for example. And then the amount of political parties, they need to be scrutinized because some parties are just coming up to see where they can come and negotiate for power and this, that, and cry aloud like here so that they can have opportunity in governance. So we need to be able to streamline those things. Because I want you to know that before slavery, Africa had a good governance system. In fact, we ran Africa as empires. It was not just like countries like that. Vast empires. The Mali Empire, the Songa Empire, all those empires were there and they were running. But it was only based on what? Patronage mentality and system of government. We have to begin to look at that and do introspection and say this is where we went wrong. Our mentality of saying it is those who are at the high echelons of power that everybody downward should be able to work for. So they are the ones that maximize. They get $15,000 and then the ordinary man gets $200 and they expect him to go to work every day and come back and then he should remain disciplined. While the other man is cruising life and doing almost virtually nothing for the country. It's not even those who are lawmakers, they are not making any laws that are impacting the society so much. They are just cruising life. Those things need to end. When people are in governance, when they are in the civil service, they should know that they are there to serve the people. They say civil servants, but most of them are civil bosses. They are not servants. They are just serving themselves, enriching themselves. That ideology should change. That mentality should change. It's high time now that we build a society that will impact our children. Are we going to continue in this kind of trend forever? No. We have to change. Therefore, in my book, I proposed a lot of things. Maybe we'll really find time that I will send my book to you and then we can discuss certain important areas that I bring. For example, even the issue of Western democracy, there is strong check and balance in recall and vote of no confidence. That one is less emphasized. When a government comes to power, you hardly see any recall of any parliamentarian or legislator, even if it does minimally or abysmally, even if it does not perform for the people. In fact, our legislators almost never go home again to go and tell the people about laws or negotiate with them or talk to them about whatever their interests are. They only go back 2, 3 years to election. So all of those things should change so that people know that we are coming to serve. We are not coming to exploit the people. We are not coming for our own interest, but the interest of the people. That's one area. Then corruption is a Herculean monster that has to be handled as such. It is not something you can just go and begin to say, oh, it's another case. There should be a robust mechanism, intelligence, information that will bring out the evidence quickly so that in the space of 1 to 3 months at most, every corruption case has been exposed, has been prosecuted, and then people go behind bars. They pay for what they have caused the country to go into because corruption is a cold war that is killing Africa. Remember that countries like Singapore were corrupt, but they decided that no, we can't continue in this path. Otherwise, we are just going to be isolated or we're going to be just serving other people. And they made an informed decision to depart from that kind of path. It has to be intentional. It has to be intentional. So there should be a fast track court, exclusive fast track court to fight against corruption. That's yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you so much. We don't have so much time. I think at this point we need to call it a day. I want to say thank you to you, Bishop Dr. Abraham Williams, for your time and insight on the topic egalitarian driving Africa's political and economic future. And hopefully we would have to invite you again and again in no distance time. I hope you make yourself available for us again.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very much elated to have been here on this other side in the discussion.
So egalitarianism challenges Africa to rethink power, democracy, and development beyond inherited systems. Whether idealistic or achievable, the conversation raises a critical question for our time. Can equality truly drive Africa's political and economic future? That's food for thought. And that is where we call it a day here on our Cross Borders. Until next time, don't forget to follow us via our social media platforms at Sook News TV and subscribe to our YouTube channels for instant updates. On behalf of the Across Borders team, we want to say thank you for watching. And once again, my name is Grace Komalafe. Until next time I see you again, do have a great day.